there are some key components to a relational database management system. For example, the first piece of that puzzle is a database. Database is at the top of a database management system. Before you begin designing any database, you have to describe the database and what purpose it's going to serve. For example, I've used accounting in our little example here. Accounting would be the top level definition of a database. Within accounting, you could have accounts receivable, accounts payable, general ledger, purchase order, sales order, payroll, and so on. Those would all be pieces of the puzzle underneath an accounting database. So database is the first top level component. Underneath a database, you have a table. So the accounting database would have a accounts receivable table, or one or more tables that make up the accounts receivable structure. So at the top, I would have accounting, if you will. If it looks like a folder, and underneath it, perhaps I would have a AR table. And underneath accounting, you could have multiple tables, as I was saying. Accounts payable could be another one. Perhaps general ledger could be another one. And so on. These structures and the definition of these structures has to be in order. For example, a table cannot come before a database. Database has to be defined first, followed by a table. Once a table has been defined, the column is next. Columns, they're defined within tables. And they're the ones that actually store the data. For example, in our accounting database, which would be at the top level, underneath that, I would have a accounts receivable table, and underneath that, I would have a customer ID column. In this structure, the tables are the ones that consist of columns. So the table, if you will, followed by columns, and then column, and then column. If that sounds cryptic, it can be very easily understood. Let me explain. So if I have a products table, underneath the products table, I may have a product ID column, and a product name column, and a product cost column. Does that make sense? So it goes database, and then tables, and then from tables to columns. And finally, you describe a data type. Data types determine what kind of data will be stored. For example, if you have a customer ID column, that will more than likely be of numeric data type, which is very different than having a product column. A product column would most likely be of a alphanumeric type. Correct? Because you're going to name the product. Your cheese and bread and shoes and jackets and really whatever you're selling, whether it's a product or service, really doesn't matter. So the type of data, numeric, whether it's alphanumeric, which contains text. Maybe it's a date. Maybe it's a currency. If you're dealing with banking type information, you're going to have a lot of currency. Dates are everywhere. So are IDs and numeric data. So, in summary, you have databases at the top, tables underneath, columns underneath that, and finally data types. So what ends up happening is that you have a database called accounting, a table that is titled accounts receivable within the accounting database. And then you end up having a column called customer ID or product name, perhaps, underneath that. And then that customer ID or product name would have a numeric or a alphanumeric data type. When you combine this whole thing, the database table, column, data types, with multiple tables, you end up getting what is referred to as a schema. That's what I'm going to talk to you about next. So glad you're here. Hopefully you're learning something.